The ballroom shimmered like a palace. Chandeliers threw golden light across the polished marble floor, bouncing off glassware and sequined dresses. Laughter carried over the hum of the string quartet, and the smell of champagne and expensive perfume hung thick in the air. It was the kind of night where everything sparkled, except me. At the center of it all stood him, my boss, the man who had built this company into what everyone believed was an empire. His suit was tailored to perfection, his grin wide enough to hide 1,000 sins. The CEO's voice boomed through the microphone as he listed accomplishment after accomplishment. 2 decades of leadership, loyalty, brilliance. The crowd erupted into applause after every sentence, hanging on his every word like disciples around their prophet. But in my hand I held something that didn't shine, an envelope, plain white and heavy as a stone. My fingers shook as I tore it open, half expecting it to be some invitation, or perhaps an acknowledgement for the years I had given to this company, but no. 5 words stared back at me, sharp and merciless. We no longer need you. The room tilted. I blinked, thinking maybe I had read it wrong. But the words didn't change. They carved themselves deeper into my chest the longer I stared. 8 years of my life. 8 years of early mornings and sleepless nights, of missed birthdays, canceled vacations, sacrificed health. 8 years of shielding his mistakes, of covering up details that would have ruined him, of burying secrets that weren't even mine to bury. And this was my reward? Fired in silence. No handshake, no farewell toast. No thank you for your service, just a quiet dismissal slipped into my palm by a trembling HR assistant who couldn't even look me in the eye. I looked up from the paper, searching for him. There he was, laughing, shaking hands, raising a glass of champagne that probably cost more than my rent. He looked untouchable, adored, worshipped. The king of the empire, standing tall on the foundation I had helped build with my silence. For a moment I wanted to scream. I wanted to cut through the cheers and shout his name, to force every smiling face in that room to see me, to hear the truth. But the words caught in my throat. My chest felt heavy, my vision blurred. Nobody would have listened anyway. In their eyes I was just another shadow in the corner, a disposable cog in his perfect machine. I almost walked out. Almost. But then something caught my eye. The letter wasn't just a termination notice. The language was strange, almost coded. My eyes scanned the paragraphs again, my pulse quickening with every line. Words like compliance closure and file consolidation jumped off the page. This wasn't standard HR paperwork. I had processed enough termination files over the years to know the language by heart. This was something else. Something they didn't expect me to notice. Why would my firing reference files? Which files? And why would they need to be consolidated after my departure? The envelope suddenly felt heavier. My heart thudded in my ears. This wasn't about me being replaced or some budget cut excuse. This was about covering something up, something I wasn't supposed to see. I folded the paper and tucked it back into the envelope, sliding it into my jacket pocket as if I were concealing a weapon. My grief shifted into something darker. Suspicion, determination, even hunger. For the first time that night, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. The CEO called my boss back to the stage, announcing a surprise tribute. The lights dimmed, and a giant screen lit up behind him. A video began to play. Employee after employee appeared, thanking him for his leadership, his generosity, his vision. They called him a mentor, a savior, even a friend. My stomach twisted at the lies. Because I knew the truth. I had seen the moments they hadn't. The corners cut to save money. The accidents quietly swept under the rug. The broken promises to people who trusted him. And worst of all, the night he had asked me to destroy something that should never have been destroyed. That memory clawed at the edge of my mind now, rising like a ghost I had tried to bury. The night in the archive room, the sealed box with his name on it. His words still rang in my ears. No one can ever know about this. Not ever. Back then I obeyed. I was loyal. I was stupid, but now I had nothing left to lose. As the tribute video ended and the crowd roared with applause, I looked at his face on the screen, smiling, flawless, larger than life. And I whispered a promise only I could hear. This isn't over. Because inside that envelope wasn't just the end of my career. It was the first crack in his empire, the beginning of his downfall. The applause from the tribute still echoed as I slipped out of the ballroom. I couldn't stand the sight of their smiling faces anymore. Every laugh, every cheer, every praise for him was a knife in my gut. I walked down the quiet hallway, the music fading behind me. until I found myself standing in front of the glass window that overlooked the city. The skyline shimmered in lights, cold and distant. For 8 years I had watched that view from my office window, believing I was part of something bigger, something worth sacrificing for. I gave him everything, my loyalty, my silence, even pieces of my soul. And now, I was nothing more than a ghost with an envelope in my pocket. My mind drifted back to the beginning, when I first joined the company. I was younger, hungrier, desperate to prove myself. He saw that in me. He told me I reminded him of himself when he started. Those words hooked me. They made me believe he saw me as more than just another employee. I believed he wanted to mentor me, shape me into someone who mattered. And maybe that's how it began, the grooming. Because I didn't notice it at first. The late-night requests, the confidential projects that never appeared in official records, the whispered instructions that left no paper trail. I thought I was being trusted, being tested. That's what loyalty does, it blinds you. I remembered the first time he asked me to shred documents. Not ordinary files, sensitive ones. Records of safety reports that painted the company in a bad light. I hesitated, but his voice was calm, reassuring. "It's a formality," he said. "If the board sees those numbers out of context, it could ruin everything. Don't worry, you're protecting jobs." I wanted to believe him. So I fed those pages into the shredder, one after another, until the evidence was nothing but ribbons of paper on the floor. That night I told myself it was harmless, that it was for the greater good. But then it happened again, and again, and each time the weight in my chest grew heavier. The worst was the night in the archive room. I still see it in my dreams. He handed me a sealed box with his name scrawled across the side in black marker. His eyes were cold that night, his voice sharper than usual. "This never existed," he said. "You'll understand one day." I wanted to ask what was inside. I wanted to know why his hands trembled as he pushed it into mine. But instead, I carried it to the incinerator and watched the flames swallow whatever secrets it held. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I was loyal, that he would never let me fall. But tonight, as I stood in the empty hallway with that envelope in my pocket, I realized what a fool I had been. I wasn't his protege. I wasn't his ally. I was his shield, his scapegoat, his insurance policy. And now that he no longer needed me, he had tossed me aside like the very papers I once burned for him. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from the memory. A message. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. The text read, "They're cutting you out because you know too much. Meet me, tomorrow, 10 a.m., Café Verdun." My stomach dropped. My hands went cold. Who was this? How did they know? And what exactly did they think I knew? The screen dimmed, and I stared at my reflection in the black glass. For the first time in years, I didn't recognize the person looking back. But one thing was certain. This wasn't coincidence. Someone else out there knew the truth. And maybe, just maybe, they had been waiting for me to finally wake up. The celebration roared on in the ballroom. But for me, the night had shifted. I wasn't just a discarded employee anymore. I was a threat. And that meant the game had only just begun. The night after the celebration felt endless. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I lay in bed with the envelope on the nightstand. The words, "We no longer need you," flashing through my mind like neon signs in the dark. But it wasn't the firing that kept me awake. It was the message. That single line from a stranger. "They're cutting you out because you know too much." By morning, my body was restless, my mind already playing scenarios over and over. Who would text me? Who even knew what I had done for him? No one, not even my closest colleagues, knew about the documents I shredded, the sealed box I burned, the nights I stayed behind in the archive room. Nobody knew because I had been careful, loyal, silent, unless someone had been watching all along. At 10 a.m. sharp, I stepped into Café Verdun. The place was small, tucked between two high-rise buildings. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and warm bread, a sharp contrast to the cold dread in my stomach. My eyes scanned the tables, students with laptops, businessmen tapping at their phones, a couple whispering by the window. Normal, too normal. Then I saw him. A man in his 40s, dressed in a wrinkled suit, sitting alone with a coffee that had gone cold. His eyes locked onto mine the moment I walked in. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just nodded once as if confirming I was the one. I sat across from him, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Who are you?" I asked. He leaned forward, his voice low. Someone who used to trust him. Like you. My chest tightened. My boss? He gave a bitter smile. He's not just your boss. He's a thief, a liar, and worse than that. He's a man who builds his empire on other people's graves. The words made my skin crawl. I wanted to demand proof, but deep down I already knew. My memories answered for him. The shredded reports, the hidden box, the way his voice hardened when he said, "This never existed." "Why me?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "Because you were close enough to see the cracks," he said. "You kept them quiet. That made you valuable, but now you're a risk." I felt the envelope in my jacket like a weight. The letter, they mentioned files. "Do you know what that means?" He slid a small flash drive across the table. "It means they're consolidating evidence. They want to erase any link between you and what he's done. This," he tapped the drive, "is what I managed to save before they locked me out." I stared at it, my hand hovering. My instinct screamed not to touch it, not to get pulled any deeper. But curiosity, no hunger, won. I slipped the drive into my pocket. "What's on it?" I asked. His eyes flicked around the cafe, scanning for ears that might be listening. "Proof. Records they buried. Decisions that cost lives. Projects that never should have passed safety inspections. And your name? Tied to every one of them." My breath caught. "They set me up?" He nodded. "You were their shield. Their fireproof wall. You took the fall without knowing it. The room spun. My loyalty, my silence, my sacrifices. They hadn't just used me. They had framed me." Before I could respond, he leaned in closer, his voice a whisper now. "Be careful. If they cut you out, it's because they're tying up loose ends. You're not just unemployed, you're a liability." A shiver crawled up my spine. I glanced around, suddenly paranoid. Every face in the cafe felt like a watcher. Every shadow seemed to lean closer. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Because I made the same mistake. I stayed quiet too long. I let him ruin me, and now you're the only one who can bring him down." My throat went dry. "And if I don't?" He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw fear there. Real, raw fear. "Then you'll end up like the others." "The others?" My voice cracked. He opened his mouth to explain, but stopped. His eyes darted to the window. I turned just in time to see a black car parked across the street, its windows tinted too dark, its engine still running. When I looked back, the man was already gone, his chair empty, his cold coffee abandoned, and all I had left was the flash drive burning a hole in my pocket, and 1,000 new questions clawing at my chest. The flash drive felt heavier than metal as I left the cafe. Every step down the street, I half expected someone to grab my shoulder, to drag me into that black car still idling by the curb, but no one came. I slipped into the crowd, my pulse racing, until the city swallowed me whole. Back in my apartment, the silence pressed against my ears. I set the drive on the desk and stared at it like it might bite. That man's words still echoed in my head. "You were their shield, their fireproof wall, and now you're a liability." For 8 years, I thought I was protecting him, protecting the company, but now the thought gnawed at me. What if I had been protecting something far worse? I plugged the drive into my laptop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a folder appeared, labeled with a single word: Ashcroft. My boss's last name. My hand hesitated on the mouse, my chest tightening. Once I opened this, there would be no going back. Whatever I saw, I couldn't unsee. My curiosity wrestled with fear, but fear lost. I clicked. Dozens of files unfolded before me. PDFs, spreadsheets, scanned memos. My eyes darted across the screen, searching for anything familiar, anything that proved this wasn't just paranoia. The first document was a safety report from 6 years ago. My stomach dropped as I read the bolded line at the top. Critical failure risk, immediate recall recommended. The product was one of our flagship designs. I remembered it. I remembered the celebration when it launched, the glowing press releases, the way my boss called it his proudest achievement. But this report, dated months before the launch, clearly showed the product wasn't safe. It wasn't just unsafe, it was deadly. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. Engineers had flagged potential malfunctions that could cause catastrophic accidents. Whole communities could be at risk. And what had my boss done? Ignored it, buried it, shredded it. A memory punched me in the chest. Late one night, stacks of paper on my desk. He had told me they were duplicates, unimportant. He asked me to feed them into the shredder while he watched. My throat went dry. These weren't duplicates. These were warnings. I forced myself to open the next file. Another report. This one tied to environmental damage. Illegal dumping near one of our facilities. Toxic waste disguised as routine shipments. I remembered signing off on those transfers, because he said the paperwork was streamlined. Logistics. My signature was right there, stamped at the bottom of the page. My vision blurred. My name was on everything. Every shredded report, every shipment approval, every memo that kept dangerous truths hidden. I wasn't just a pawn. I was the paper trail. Panic surged through me. If this ever came out, I wouldn't just be unemployed. I would be ruined, destroyed, maybe even in prison. And that's why they cut me loose. Because I knew enough to connect the dots, but not enough to prove my innocence. I leaned back in my chair, my hands shaking. The room felt smaller, darker. My mind screamed to stop, to shut the laptop, to throw the drive into the nearest river and pretend I had never seen it. But something stronger kept me glued to the screen. Rage. 8 years. 8 years of loyalty, silence, sacrifice. And now I saw the truth. He had been using me from the beginning. Grooming me. Grooming my mistakes, my naivety, my need for approval, until my fingerprints were all over his crimes. I scrolled deeper into the files, half dreading what else I'd find. And then I froze. It was a scanned letter, handwritten, addressed to me. My breath caught as I clicked it open. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was his. My boss's. The date at the top chilled me to the bone, 3 years ago. The letter was short, almost casual, but the words sent ice down my spine. If anything ever comes back, they'll look at you first. Don't worry, you'll hold. You always do. I pushed back from the desk, my chair scraping against the floor. My chest heaved. He had planned this. From the beginning, he had set me up as the shield, the fall guy. He never saw me as an employee. Never as a protege. I was his scapegoat, waiting to burn when the fire came. And now the fire was here. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling. A noise from outside snapped my head up, the sound of tires on wet pavement. I rushed to the window and peered through the blinds. That same black car from the cafe was parked across the street. Its engine was still running, and this time I was sure it wasn't coincidence. The car outside stayed for hours. Long after the sky turned black, its engine hummed like a predator's purr. I sat in the dark of my apartment, blinds drawn, laptop closed, the flash drive in my pocket. My heart thudded in my chest with each passing minute. Every creak of the floorboards above, every whisper of the wind against the glass felt like a signal. He knew. He must have known the drive had reached me. But fear is a funny thing. It either paralyzes you or ignites you. And somewhere between the shadows and the glow of the street lamp outside, my fear turned into something else. Cold, steady, and deliberate. For 8 years I'd followed his orders, played the loyal soldier, kept my mouth shut while he built his empire on ashes and lies. Tonight, staring at the silhouette of that black car, I realized I knew his habits better than anyone. His routines, his weaknesses, his blind spots. If he wanted me to be the fall guy, he'd underestimated me. Because the one thing he taught me, without meaning to, was how to destroy someone without ever touching them. I powered the laptop back on. The drive's folder blinked at me from the screen. This time I didn't flinch. I dove deeper, scanning through emails, invoices, offshore transfers. Each click felt like a shovel digging his grave. Then I found it, an internal memo from a month ago. Compliance closure wasn't just HR language. It was the code name for an internal purge, wiping evidence, shifting assets, eliminating liabilities, and my name was highlighted in red at the top of the list. A chill ran through me, but I kept reading. Attached to the memo was an itinerary, my boss's itinerary. He had another event tomorrow night, a private dinner with board members at the hotel downtown. The file even listed the security staff, the entry codes, the seating arrangement. My hands stopped trembling. This was the opportunity. I picked up my phone and typed a message to the unknown number that had warned me. I have the files. He's vulnerable tomorrow night. I hesitated, then added, "Help me." The reply came instantly. "We're ready when you are." We? My chest tightened. How many others were out there waiting for this? Watching him? Waiting for someone to move first? I didn't know, but I knew this. I wasn't alone anymore. I began printing the most damning documents from the drive, safety reports, financial transfers, the letter he wrote to me. I slid each page into a plain black folder. My hands were steady now. This wasn't panic. This was preparation. From the window, the black car's headlights flicked once, then twice, before the engine finally went silent. It rolled away slowly, disappearing into the night. He thought I was still the same obedient employee who would freeze, who would hide, who would stay silent. He had no idea that every night I'd spent covering his tracks. I'd been learning how to walk them backwards. Tomorrow night I would stop being his shield. Tomorrow night I'd become his mirror, and when he looked into it, he'd see every sin he thought he'd buried. The hotel lobby gleamed like a stage, every chandelier dripping gold, every smile rehearsed. I blended in with the crowd, a shadow among the glittering guests, though my heart pounded like a war drum. He was here. I could feel it before I saw him. My boss stood near the banquet hall doors, glass of champagne in hand, laughing too loud. His suit was pressed to perfection, his tie glimmering with a subtle pattern that screamed power. 20 years at the company, celebrated as a visionary, a survivor, a king. And yet I carried in my bag the proof that his kingdom was built on bones. I kept my distance, weaving through the crowd, eyes sharp. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A message from the unknown number. "We're inside." Inside, my throat went dry. I scanned the room again. Who? The waiter pouring wine with a steady hand? The woman adjusting her necklace by the elevator? Or the man at the corner table, staring into his glass as if waiting for a cue? I didn't know, and maybe that was the point. They could be anyone. They were watching. They were waiting. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't the only one carrying the weight of this secret. I slipped into the banquet hall just as the doors closed behind the last guest. Round tables draped in ivory cloth circled the room, each topped with candles that flickered like nervous flames. The air smelled of expensive perfume and rare wine. At the head of the hall, a long table sat elevated, reserved for the board. My boss took his seat at the center, basking in the glow of admiration. Speeches began, each one praising his brilliance, his leadership, his unmatched loyalty to the company. I almost laughed. Loyalty. If only they knew. From my spot near the back, I clutched the folder inside my bag. Every page was a weapon sharper than a knife. I just had to choose the right moment to strike. But then I saw it. One of the board members leaning in, whispering something to him. His smile faltered. Just for a second. Then his gaze swept the room, eyes scanning the crowd. He was looking for me. My stomach tightened. Did he already suspect? Or was it paranoia gnawing at him the way it had gnawed at me? The speeches ended. Glasses clinked. The first course was served. Laughter rose again like smoke. That was when my phone buzzed a second time. Move now, before he does. Before he does. My blood turned cold. Did that mean he was already planning something tonight? I stood, my chair scraping softly against the floor. My hand tightened around the folder. I started toward the front, each step heavier than the last. Every eye felt like it could burn through me. Halfway there, my boss rose to his feet. He tapped his glass, calling for silence. The room obeyed. He looked out over the guests, smile wide again, but I caught the flicker of something else in his expression. Something darker. "Tonight," he said, voice booming. "We celebrate not just my 20 years, but the loyalty of those who've stood with me through storms most of you will never know." Storms, my jaw clenched. He was spinning the very crimes he'd committed into stories of survival. And the board, they applauded. My chest tightened. This was it, the moment. I reached into my bag, fingers brushing the folder. My breath hitched. And then across the room a voice called out. Not mine, someone else. Strong, sharp, unshaken. Loyalty? Tell them how many lives your loyalty destroyed. The room froze. My boss's smile vanished. The voice belonged to a man in the crowd, someone I hadn't noticed until now. He stood tall, eyes locked on my boss, holding up a folder identical to mine. My heart stopped. I wasn't the only one. The air cracked like glass. Every eye in the banquet hall snapped toward the man who had spoken. He stood firm, folder raised like a torch in the dark, his voice steady despite the weight of silence pressing down on all of us. 2 decades of lies, he said. 2 decades of blood on your hands. You call it loyalty? I call it destruction. My boss's jaw clenched. His knuckles whitened against the stem of his glass. For the first time in years, he didn't look untouchable. He looked cornered. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Guests glanced at each other, unsure if this was part of some twisted performance. My own heartbeat thundered so loud I thought the room could hear it. And then his eyes found mine. It was like a knife sliding between my ribs. He saw me. He knew. And in that instant, I realized the man across the room wasn't here by accident. He was part of them, the ones who had messaged me, the ones who said we're inside. The folder in his hand was proof. Proof that I wasn't alone, but also that I wasn't in control. My boss straightened his tie, forcing his smile back onto his face. "Interesting," he said, his voice low, measured. "It seems tonight we have unexpected entertainment." He turned toward the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, don't be alarmed. Some people will do anything for attention." His tone was calm, but I saw it, the faint tremor in his hand, the quick flick of his gaze to the security guards posted at the door. He wasn't calm. He was calculating. The man across the room flipped open his folder, holding up a page for all to see. "Attention?" His voice sharpened. "Tell them about the workers you silenced. Tell them about the audits you buried. Tell them about the purge list you keep." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My boss froze. That word, purge, too precise, too dangerous, too true. I knew then that the stranger wasn't bluffing. He had as much as I did, maybe more. My fingers closed around my own folder. This was my moment. I stepped forward, my chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. Dozens of eyes snapped toward me. "Everything he's saying," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I can prove." The room erupted. The whispers spread like fire through dry grass. My boss's face drained of color. He stared at me, and for a second I saw something raw behind his fury. Fear. "You," he hissed, pointing a trembling finger. "I should have cut you loose sooner." And that was when the stranger moved. He slammed his folder onto a table. Papers spilling out like a flood. Emails. Bank statements. Safety reports, names, dates, evidence. The board surged to their feet. Some demanded answers. Others looked pale, as if they had already known, but never expected it to surface in public. Security rushed forward, but the stranger didn't flinch. Instead, he pointed at me. "He has the rest. Together, it's enough to end you." For a moment, everything froze. My boss, the board, the guests, every soul in the room turned toward me. My pulse hammered in my ears. I could feel the weight of the folder in my hand, the weight of truth pressing down on me. And then, bang! Not a gunshot. A chair toppled. A guest fainted. The room dissolved into chaos. People screamed. Security barked orders. And in the center of it all, my boss grabbed the microphone, his voice booming through the noise. "Lies," he roared. "Fabrications by bitter failures who want to destroy me. None of this is real." But his voice cracked. His mask slipped. And for the first time in 20 years, the king was bleeding in front of his kingdom. I tightened my grip on the folder. The decision was right in front of me. Step back and watch him bury this again, or step forward and burn everything he'd built to the ground. And as I opened my mouth, ready to deliver the final blow, the lights in the hall went out. Darkness swallowed the room. The blackout smothered the room in instant silence. No clinking glasses, no whispers, just the sound of frantic breathing and chairs scraping against the polished floor. My hand tightened around the folder, my other reaching blindly for balance. Then footsteps. Heavy, rushed, coming closer. "Stay down!" Someone shouted in the dark. I dropped instinctively, heart pounding. My mind spun. Was this his move? Was he cutting the power to silence us? To erase everything before it spread too far? A flicker of emergency light snapped on, painting the hall in red shadows. The room looked like a crime scene. Guests huddled near the walls. Security scrambled. And in the middle stood my boss, no longer composed, no longer smiling. His jacket was open, his tie torn loose, his face twisted with raw fury. "Enough!" he shouted, voice echoing like thunder. "You think you can destroy me with papers? With rumors? I built this empire with my blood. I decide who survives and who disappears." The crowd recoiled. Some board members stepped back. Others glared at him with dawning realization, as if his outburst had confirmed everything we'd claimed. That was my chance. I rose slowly, holding the folder high. "Not anymore," I said. My voice carried farther than I expected, slicing through the panic. "Because this time, you left a trail, and I've been walking it." Gasps spread again. The stranger across the room lifted his own folder, slamming it onto the nearest table. "And you're not just fighting one of us," he added. "You're fighting all of us." My boss froze. His eyes darted from me to the stranger, then to the guests whispering in horror. He realized too late that the truth was no longer confined to the shadows. It was spilling, uncontrolled, unstoppable. And then, in desperation, he lunged. Straight toward me, The folder nearly slipped from my hands as he grabbed my jacket, pulling me close, his spit hot against my ear. "You think they'll save you?" he hissed. "You're nothing without me, nothing." But the words no longer cut. I met his eyes, steady for the first time. "Then watch what nothing can do." I shoved him back with every ounce of strength left in me. He stumbled, crashing into the board's table. Papers from both folders scattered like confetti, across the floor, into the hands of guests, into the cameras of phones now raised and recording. The evidence was no longer mine, no longer his. It belonged to everyone in that room. Security moved, but not toward me. They closed in on him. The board members barked orders, demanding answers, demanding explanations. His voice broke into shouts, then into pleas. And just like that, the king fell. The banquet hall erupted into a storm of noise. Some people fleeing, others cheering, others still frozen in disbelief. The stranger caught my eye from across the chaos, nodding once before disappearing into the crowd. I wanted to chase him, to ask who he really was, but my phone buzzed in my pocket. One last message from the unknown number. "It's done. He's finished. But remember, when one king falls, another waits to rise. Stay ready." A chill slid down my spine. Even in victory, the warning lingered like smoke. As I stepped out of the hotel into the cold night air, sirens wailed in the distance. Reporters were already gathering, their cameras hungry. Behind me, the empire I had once bled for was burning, not in flames, but in truth. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't silent. I was free. But deep down, I knew freedom wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, because the shadows I'd uncovered tonight, they were deeper than just one man. And somewhere, hidden in that darkness, someone else was already waiting. Someone who would test just how far I was willing to go.